My father and I did not speak for 11 years. I want to be precise about that. Not 11 years of strained holidays and careful conversations. Not 11 years of birthday cards sent and ignored. 11 years of nothing. No calls, no letters, no messages forwarded through my mother or my aunt or anyone else. Nothing. A silence that had a specific start date. A Sunday in November when I was 36 years old, and that had lasted until the morning my mother called me and said, "Helen, your father died last night." His name was Robert. He was 67 years old, and he died of a heart attack in his sleep, which is apparently how he would have chosen to go if anyone had asked him, which no one did. He was found by his housekeeper on a Tuesday morning. He had been dead for several hours. I had not spoken to him since I was 36. I flew home from Seattle anyway. I want to explain that because people have asked me why, and I am not sure I have a clean answer. He was my father. Whatever he had done, whatever I had done, whatever the 11 years had been, he was my father and he was dead. And my mother, who had divorced him 20 years ago and somehow remained on civil terms, was handling the arrangements alone and needed someone there. So I flew home. The service was on a Friday, a small church in the town where I grew up. More people than I expected. He had been well liked in ways I had apparently not been present to observe for the last 11 years. His business partners, his neighbors, people from the Rotary Club and the golf club and various corners of his life that I had not been part of for a long time. I sat in the front row with my mother and my aunt. I looked at the casket and I tried to feel something clear, and nothing I felt was clear. It was all mixed together, grief and anger and guilt and a particular sorrow that had no clean name. The sorrow of mourning someone you were already in the process of losing in a different way. After the service, there was a reception at the church hall. People came and said the things people say. I said thank you many times. I shook many hands. I ate a small plate of food that someone put in front of me and barely tasted it. She found me near the door. She was maybe 60, trim, professional-looking, with short gray hair and the bearing of someone who runs things. She introduced herself as Marianne Kohler. She said she had been my father's business partner for 14 years. She said she was very sorry for my loss. I said, "Thank you." I didn't know he had a partner. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "He spoke of you often. He spoke of you almost every day, actually." I didn't know what to do with that. She said, "I wonder if I could speak with you privately for a moment. There's something I'd like to give you. He asked me to a long time ago. He said, if anything ever happens to me, make sure Helen gets this." My name in her mouth felt strange, familiar in the wrong direction, like hearing your name spoken by someone who knows you better than you know them. I said, "Of course." We found a corner of the hall away from the crowd. She opened her bag and she took out a small key on a plain ring. No label. Just a key, the kind that opens a filing cabinet or a lockbox. She said, "There is a drawer in his office, the bottom left. This opens it." He kept it locked for as long as I knew him, and he never opened it at the office. I don't know what's inside. I only know he wanted you to have access to it. I took the key. She said, "I want you to know something, Helen, because I think you should hear it from someone who was there. Your father talked about you every single day. Not just sometimes. Every day. He kept a photograph of you on his desk. You must have been about 15 in it. And when people asked who it was, he always said, 'That's my daughter.' Just that. Like it was the most important thing about him." I looked at the key in my hand. She said, "I don't know what happened between you. He never told me, and I never asked. But I want you to know that whatever it was, he did not stop being your father. Not for a single day in the 14 years I knew him." She squeezed my hand once and then went to find her coat. I stood in that church hall holding a small key, and I didn't move for a long time. His office was in a building on the east side of town, a small suite on the second floor of a building that also housed a dentist and an insurance agency. Marianne had given me the address and a spare key to the outer door. I drove there the morning after the funeral, alone, before my mother was awake. The office was quiet, the way empty offices are quiet. Not peaceful, but held. The particular stillness of a space that is used to being occupied and isn't. His desk was large and orderly. The computer was off. There was a lamp and a calendar and a coffee mug that still had a ring inside it from the last cup he had drunk. And there was a photograph in a silver frame turned to face the chair he sat in. I was 15 in the photograph. I remembered the day it was taken, a Sunday in summer at my aunt's lake house, squinting into the sun with my hair wet from swimming. I was laughing at something my cousin had said. I did not remember being photographed. I did not know he had kept it. I stood there looking at it for a long time. Then I found the drawer, bottom left, locked, as Marianne had said. I put in the key and turned it and pulled it open. It was full of paper, not chaotic, organized the way he organized everything, folders labeled in his handwriting. I lifted the first one out. The tab said, "Helen, Seattle." Inside were printouts, articles, a review of a restaurant I had written for a local paper 6 years ago when I was briefly doing freelance work, a mention of my name in a neighborhood newsletter in connection with a community garden project, a photograph printed from what looked like a social media profile, my profile from several years ago, of me standing in front of the apartment building where I used to live, carrying a bag of groceries, smiling at whoever had taken the picture. He had been watching. From a distance, through the internet, through whatever small traces I had left in publicly accessible places. He had been collecting them and printing them and keeping them in a folder in a locked drawer in his office. I set that folder down and I picked up the next one. Helen, career. More articles, a piece I had written that had been published in a regional magazine, a program from a professional event where I had been listed as a speaker, notes in his handwriting on a post-it attached to the program. She spoke well, it said, confident, like she always was. He had been at the event. He had been in the room when I spoke, and I had not known he was there. My hands were shaking. I sat down in the chair across from his desk. Not his chair. I could not sit in his chair. And I went through the folders one by one. Helen, birthdays. Inside, a card for every birthday for 11 years. 37th, 38th, 39th. All the way through to 47, which was the birthday I had just passed 4 months ago. All of them sealed. All of them addressed to me at an address he apparently still had, my parents' house, forwarded by my mother who had said nothing, who I would need to talk to about that, who had apparently been complicit in a way I was only beginning to understand. The cards were not opened because they had never been sent. They had been written and sealed and addressed and then kept here, in this drawer, for 11 years. Helen, just in case. This folder was thicker than the others. Inside was a letter, typed, many pages. And underneath the letter, a smaller envelope, sealed, with my name on the front in his handwriting. Not typed, handwritten. I read the typed letter first. He had written it 3 years ago. He said he had written it and rewritten it many times, and this was the version he thought he could let stand. He said he was writing it because he was 64 years old and aware that the just in case was becoming less hypothetical. He explained the 11 years. He told me what had happened from his side, his version of the Sunday in November that had ended us, which was different from mine in the ways that I suppose all versions of a bad story differ from each other. He was not making excuses. He was careful about that. He said, "I am not writing this to argue with what you remember. I am writing this because I want you to know that I understood, after, what I had done. Not right away. It took me years to fully understand it, but I got there." He wrote about trying to reach out. 3 times in the first 2 years. Calls that I hadn't returned. A letter I had sent back, unopened. He said, "After the 3rd time, I decided that if you needed the silence, I would give you the silence. I told myself I was respecting your wishes. I think I was also afraid. I was afraid that if I tried again and you refused again, it would mean something I wasn't ready to accept. So I stopped trying. And then years went by, and I couldn't figure out how to cross them." He wrote, "I thought about you every day. I want to be honest about that. Not in a way that makes me virtuous. Thinking about someone and doing nothing is not a virtue. But I thought about you. I kept your photograph on my desk, and I told everyone who asked that you were my daughter. Not were, are. I always said are." He said, "I have done a poor job of being your father in many ways. I know that. I am not asking you to forget it. But I have loved you for 47 years without a single interruption, even in the 11 years when you couldn't feel it from where you were standing. I need you to know that. I need that to be somewhere you can find it." The last section was the shortest. He wrote, "There is a separate letter in this folder. I have been writing it since you were born. I add to it sometimes. I don't know if it will help. I hope it will help. I hope you read it." I set down the typed letter. I looked at the sealed envelope with my name on it for a long time. Then I opened it. Inside were pages and pages of his handwriting, collected over years. I could tell by the way the ink color changed, the way the handwriting shifted slightly over time, the way handwriting does as a person ages. He had been adding to it since I was born. 47 years of entries, not dated consistently but accumulated, like a record he had been keeping of what it meant to him to be my father. The first entry was from when I was 2 days old. He had written, "She is very small and she makes a specific sound when she is hungry that I have already learned to recognize, and I have decided she is the most interesting person I have ever met." I read for 2 hours. I sat in that chair in his empty office and I read everything he had kept in the locked drawer. And when I was finished, I put it all back in the folders and I closed the drawer and I sat with my hands flat on my knees and the key on the desk in front of me. I did not know how to feel. I still do not know entirely how to feel. There is grief in this, obviously. Grief for the 11 years. Grief for the conversations we did not have. Grief for the father I missed and the daughter he missed. There is anger, too, still, underneath everything else. Because what happened in November when I was 26 years old happened, and a drawer full of birthday cards does not undo it. But there is something else also, something I did not expect to find in that office, something closer to being known. He knew where I lived. He had read things I had written. He had been in a room where I spoke and sat in the audience and watched, and gone home and written, "She spoke well, confident, like she always was." He had kept 47 years of notes about what it meant to him to be my father, and he had locked them in a drawer and given the key to his business partner with instructions. He was not ready to give them to me while he was alive. but he made sure I would have them. I called Marianne from the parking lot. I said, "How long did he have the key plan?" She said, "He gave me that key 8 years ago. He said, if anything ever happens to me, Helen needs to come to the office." 8 years ago. I was 39. He had made that plan when I was 39 years old, in the middle of the 11 years of nothing, and he had trusted his business partner to carry it. She had carried it for 8 years. She had brought it to the funeral. She had found me near the door. I keep the key on my keychain now. I don't know why exactly. It doesn't open anything anymore. I took everything out of that drawer and brought it home, and there is nothing left to unlock. But I keep it. It is the shape of the thing he did, the thing he built in secret for 47 years and left behind for me to find. He was not a perfect father. He was not a perfect man. But he kept the photograph on his desk, and he told everyone who asked, "That's my daughter." Just that. Like it was the most important thing about him. Maybe it was.